recommend my students doing is breathing. I myself, just outside of school, I'm a big, yoga person. So I bring a lot of that mindfulness just into my teaching regularly.
How do you see the SAT evolving? Would we give it as much leverage and importance as we do?
With AI now, college admissions committees are seeing so many just AI generated.
Welcome to the podcast, Alyson.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that warm welcome and lovely introduction.
Perfect. So our topic for today is the SAT test prep. So I would like to ask you, how do you think the SAT has changed over the past few years?
That's a great question. And I think even for me, just within the past decade of me being in the classroom, I've seen it change so much, just from my own experience as a student, and then throughout the past 10 years, how it's changed. I think the biggest thing is the format, how it's gone digital, which, is, I understand, easier for, grading and administration purposes. I know that the College Board had came out earlier this year about seeing the uptick in cheating and how using the digital platforms kind of helps them eliminate that issue. However, studies also show that students learn better and do better on tests when they're pencil and paper. So I think that's been a really big, almost like a tension between getting ready for the test and knowing how students best perform, but just having to adapt to the way that it is today. So that's definitely the biggest thing that I've, myself and my colleagues have been grappling with over the years.
Interesting. You did mention the change in format, moving towards more of a digital SAT approach. So how do you think students are adapting to that change?
So, I mean, honestly, the kids are so resilient, right? Students, they, even though I, again, believe in, pencil paper, when you write things down, you're more able to remember them better, just being able to annotate a passage with pen and paper. However, with that said, right, the students, they're so, just adept with all types of technology. To them, it really didn't make that big of a change. I think for some of them, they prefer that. Having gone through COVID, like they're just used to doing everything online. And I know just in my own district, the students have so many platforms that they use. There's something, I think it's like 11 that they are required to interact with, like almost on a daily basis. So, as much as it's wild to think how reliant on technology we are in education, in terms of prepping for the SAT, the students are ready. Like they just, they test online so frequently anyway, that I think for them, they didn't skip a beat, which is good. It's taking the teachers, I think, a little bit longer to catch up to where the students are.
Correct. There's even been the introduction of AI technology now and AI tutoring. So I think that's another avenue that students have been pursuing.
Absolutely. And a huge one thing, so I'm in a district that, again, with our 11 platforms, we use Khan Academy as another form of test prep. And the students have been using the Khanmigo feature, which is like that AI. And they use it for all manner of things, like they, not just SAT test prep. But yeah, that's definitely been a whole nother tool for differentiation. Like the kids can identify their own weaknesses or challenges and then use AI to help them study, even more, which is great. Like, I think that's an awesome use for it. So yeah, it's not all bad.
Correct. I assume preparing for the SAT, just like any other examination, it comes along with a lot of stress and anxiety. And even speaking as a student myself, from my perspective, there's always a little bit of stress, not only preparing for the examination, but also kind of answering it. So what tips could you give students to, manage that stress and anxiety?
That's a great question. And I feel very similarly as well, just throughout my own, educational experiences and all the standardized tests. It's so anxiety inducing. What I always recommend my students doing is breathing. I myself, just outside of school, I'm a big, yoga person. So I bring a lot of that mindfulness just into my teaching regularly. Like I can tell when something's going on, whether it's out in the world, right, current events, or if they have another big standardized test coming up. So I do a lot of those, just small breathing exercises with my students in all grades, not just, the juniors or 10th graders who are preparing for the PSAT as well. But so that's one thing I always tell them. I'm like, hey, remember when we do, the starfish breathing exercise? Like, do that when you need a minute. Like, take a second between sections. Another thing that's really interesting, speaking of the changes to the online platform, it's a little bit less rigid. Traditionally, when you would proctor the SAT, there were like the 5 sections and everybody had to start and stop at the same time. With online, like they can kind of just go at their own pace. There are moments where they do have to stop whole group before they transition between the math and the ELA modules. But I mean, aside from that, they have a lot more ownership over their own time. The online test day toolkit has the timer built in. So I tell them, hey, be monitoring your time and use that for your own, when to take a break. Like if it's been 10 minutes straight, take a second, look away from the screen. I think that's another thing, not just doing, deep breaths and taking a pause, but also the fatigue of just looking at, they're all sitting under these like lovely bright fluorescent lights and then also staring at the screen. So it's, I tell them, okay, look away for 20 seconds. Like close your eyes, give your eyes a break as well. So I think just those small things, students that do take advantage of them, that it does seem to help. It doesn't eliminate, the test anxiety completely. But those are my 2 kind of quick tips and tricks. In terms of test anxiety in general, I always tell them the best way to alleviate that is to just feel prepared. So if you've studied, if you've done all that you could to be ready for that day, like then at that point, you've done all you can. Like just kind of let your preparation relieve some of that anxiety as well. So those are just things that I've told students over the years.
Correct. I completely agree with the fact that you just got to be completely prepared. I
Mhm.
think that's your only ammunition against, stress and anxiety. The more prepared you are, the less anxious you feel on that particular day. And
Absolutely.
and breathing techniques, people tend to overlook that. But I've recently gotten quite mindful about different techniques to breathe and stuff. I've been watching podcasts and I learned from there. So that does help too. And you did mention the starfish breathing technique, is it?
Yes.
Could
It's
you
just
tell me more about that? I'd love to
sure.
learn
So it's
it.
literally just like you use your hand like almost like a starfish, I guess, and it's 5. So
Okay.
you just like pretty much do in and out 5 times, like 5 deep breaths. But for some kids, like the tactile, like instead of just counting in my head to 5, like actually like okay, breathe in and out, breathe in and out, like having the element of just having your hand as like a physical representation of that. So some kids really like that one too.
That's interesting. I'll definitely look more into it and maybe try and do it myself.
Yeah, I think you'd like it.
Definitely. So many students feel like the SAT score is a reflection of their intelligence and it could make and break their future. But I think looking at the bigger picture, that's not completely true.
Mhm,
And they tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves because of that. And not only the SAT, I think any examination in
mhm.
general, any entrance examination per se. So, how can students change their mindset about this misconception?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad that you, like, had, that question prepared because this one almost goes back and forth. It's not really even having to do it, right? They could opt out. It was more about their holistic, right? Their grades, their resume, their college essay. Those things weighed heavier. Unfortunately, I have within the past, I would say 2 years mostly, seen the pendulum swing the other way. With AI now, college admissions committees are seeing so many just AI generated essays. So you say, hey, no, we actually need your SAT score. So it's not great news for the students that, we have seen that shift within the past 10 years or so. It is becoming more and more important. Even for us, so like I'm in Rhode Island and the state schools used to be test optional and they're not anymore. I don't know if that's also part of RIDES, the Rhode Island Department of Ed. We only use PSAT and SAT as our like standardized tests. So some other states like Massachusetts has the MCAS, or we used to have the Park assessment. We don't have any of that anymore. So the way that RIDE is determining school ratings, students, right, proficiency, it's based on how they perform on the PSAT 10 and the SAT 11. So the state actually pays, all the students have to take them in school, which is another change, right? From, historically having to wake up early on a Saturday and get to school. They get to just do it during the school day, which is great. But it does not help that whole added anxiety, right? For the teachers in the school buildings as well. Like a lot of how our school gets ranked and funding and everything is dependent on their SAT scores. So it's kind of unfortunate. Like I'm also not a huge standardized test person, like as an English teacher, right? I love writing papers, having discussions as my forms of assessment, but it's just the world we live in. Like it's just swinging back the other way. And I do think that is kind of a negative, proponent of AI. I think the college essay used to have so much more weight, and now they just don't know who's writing any college essays anymore. So they are looking more for those standardized tests. And that's kind of true too with grading. I know that, teachers' grades now are even, does everybody just get an A? So even students' transcripts, you might have a straight A student, but they're still going to look at that SAT score because they don't trust whoever, whatever their teacher gave them, were those classes rigorous. So it's really an interesting time to be a student. I don't envy them. I know they're under so much pressure. But I think unfortunately a lot of that is just the current environment of academia. Like these admissions counselors are now looking back to your standardized test scores, which is a change because it's gone back and forth.
You did mention the test optional approach that colleges are taking now.
Mhm.
So in the future, how do you see the SAT evolving? Would we give it as much leverage and importance as we do, since students have an option to not take it after all?
I think I could see it just becoming more and more, even with the College Board. Like to kind of compare it, right, to other College Board assessments, even with the rollout and the amping up of AP offerings, right? So the College Board not only has the SAT, which lucky for them, right, has become more and more prominent, but they've also really rolled out and the AP courses and more tests, and more students are taking those tests as well. So I do think that trend will continue, that the importance on the test is just going to be even more and more, more and more prevalent with more and more of these standardized tests rolling out. And I think that's just the College Board, too. A lot of that's just their model. Like, how can they increase? Like, I'm sure they love that in Rhode Island, every kid takes, the PSAT and the SAT. Like, think about how much money they're making just off of my small state, right? So I can absolutely see that continuing to be a trend.
Interesting. So in a nutshell, it's absolutely unpredictable.
Yeah, totally.
It is.
Yeah.
So as we discussed earlier, SAT test preps can be very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So could you speak more about what role do parents play in students' SAT preparations?
I think it's huge, and for multiple reasons, right? I think parent and family involvement is so crucial to the educational process in general. I always encourage parents whenever I get to meet them, to just ask their students how things are going. What are they learning? What do they think about what they're learning? I know typical teenagers, right? They don't want to share a lot. But anytime a parent can get their kid to open up a little bit, like, oh, you're reading that book? Like, what do you think about it? Not just, how was your day? Good. Okay. Just pushing students' thinking, I think, is a critical role that parents can play. And even just small questions like that are really helpful. Similarly, when it comes to SAT prep, especially my 10th and 11th grade families, I encourage them to, ask your child, are they keeping up with their study regimen, right? They should have one. They should be spending, I recommend 45 to 60 minutes a week studying for the SAT. So, the parents can ask their child, hey, how's that going? Even something like that, just knowing that their teacher's asking them at school and then their parents asking them at home, it just kind of helps reinforce it. And again, even if the parent is not super comfortable with the content, I think just asking those questions like, are you sticking to your study schedule? What are some things you're struggling with? Those things just kind of help the student become more aware too. Like, oh, what am I struggling with? Like, let me think about it. Let me look at my, test practice that I've done and see how it's going. So I always am a big believer in parent community relationships. I think that's the best way to help our students succeed. And I think that's the same for SAT prep as well. Just having someone outside of the building who is asking questions and also just being a source of support. Like I can do all the breathing exercises, when I see the kids for 1 hour a day, but if they have someone at home who's also telling them it's okay, like you're more than just your SAT score, that's helpful as well, just for their overall, stress and mental health.
I completely agree with your point about having better communication with your kids and letting them know that you're there to support them, irrespective of whatever happens. I mean, with the SAT score, whatever it is, it shouldn't define their child. That
Yes.
does help a lot. Yeah,
And it's so hard. It's like this tension all the time that, like, yes, the test is so important, but then I'm also like, yeah, you're way more than your test score. Like, it's not the end of the
correct.
world. But to them, in trying to get into these colleges, like it does feel like that for them. So I don't envy the position, that young people are in today at all. But I think the more that we can tell them that, hopefully, it'll sink in.
You did also mention informing the parents about asking their child to set aside a certain amount of time where they focus on studying and preparing. So, could you speak about what role does time management play
Mm.
in the SAT test prep, and how can you better manage your time as a student?
Totally. And that's such a hard thing for our society, right? Like we have so much coming at us all the time. The kids are inundated with news and social media, and there's so much content coming at them. So I really like to recommend, again, a study schedule. And again, I'm also a research teacher. So I'm always like looking at, best practices. What does the research say? In general, right? Humans, like our attention spans are less now. It's why they make
True.
TikToks, right? They're short, they're
Absolutely.
quick. So I tell them, it used to be don't study for more than 45 minutes at a time. Now I even tell them 25 minutes and then stop, take a break. Like if you can focus and get a good solid 20 to 25 minutes in and then stop and take a break, like that's great. That's actually going to help your brain process that information. Um, and even then, right, 20 minutes is challenging, especially if they're on their own, right, out in the world and, everything, all the things going on, right, for our teenagers. But um, again, just building kind of that resiliency, that also helps. So if it's like, if you're able to sit for 20 minutes and study, you're helping yourself with pacing, you're, setting good time boundaries for your brain to retain that information. And that's also building up your resiliency on test day. That way you're not sitting in front of the computer for 4 hours and just calling it quits, So I recommend 20, 25 minutes, always building in breaks in between. To get them up and moving, right? We sit in front of the screens all the time too. All about trying to find that healthy balance.
I think it's social media. That's the
Totally.
culprit. It's our damn phones that we
Yes.
just cannot put aside. And it's not
Yes.
just students. I think it's everybody in general. We're just
Exactly.
so addicted to the short form content that we just keep consuming it mindlessly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see it in education too. Like so many school districts now, like they don't even read books. It's like, nope, just the excerpt. Because that is all they need for the SAT, right? They don't need to read a whole book anymore. And I'm just like, oh, what is this world coming to?
Absolutely. Just recently, I had recommended a book to a friend, and all he did was go on AI and ask for key insights. And he was like, perfect. I know exactly what I need to know. I'm not going to waste time reading the book.
And that's just the way of the
And
world now.
I
It's
was
so,
just baffled. I was like, okay, that actually does make sense to a certain extent.
yeah,
You do
yeah.
have a valid point.
But it's just like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, just, the
That's
world is
where the
always
world's heading.
changing.
Exactly. Yeah. So, beyond test scores, what else do you think universities look at beyond the SAT test scores? What do they look at in a candidate?
That, I would say definitely the resume, because kind of like I mentioned earlier, even transcripts now, um, everyone thinks grades are padded. I think that's a whole conversation for another day, right? Questioning, teacher integrity, but that's a whole separate topic. But I would say definitely the resume. And one thing in particular they look for is service. In what way have you given back to your community? Did you tutor someone? Did you do some community service? Do you volunteer? Do you partake in a club or activity at school that's not just your, academic decathlons and mock trials and things like that, but also something that shows a little bit of empathy? I really think that is now going a long way. Colleges are not just looking for the straight A students with the perfect SAT score. They also want people who can get along with people. Where have you collaborated? Where have you shown empathy and given back in some way? So I always, that's another thing. Definitely, I would tell students to look out for. Like, do you have anything on your resume or your activities list where you've shown that you can work with others and that you can, give back, that you have some kind of awareness of your community and it might not be community service per se, but even mentorship or volunteering at a school event, anything like that, I think they look to and is really valuable as well on an application.
Absolutely. I think they kind of drill it into you into school that you have to get good grades and that is what's most important. But
Mhm.
as you go into the real world outside, you
Yeah,
kind of realize, okay, I need to have skills such as learning how to build relationships, having
Mhm.
good communication, and
Absolutely.
certainly I think volunteer work and all of that does build character and just makes you ready as a whole human being, not just the marks.
I
You actually
completely
know how
agree.
to get along with people, basically. And I think that's incredibly important.
I completely agree.
The podcast has been absolutely insightful so far. So,
I'm so
just with the last question,
sure.
this one's for the audience. What's one unconventional SAT prep tip that you could give?
Okay. And you might laugh at this, and especially because I do consider myself a research teacher and I always like to support my best practices with research. This is
Okay.
nothing research based. So, growing up, my family is French Canadian. So, I had a meme, which is grandma in French. And my meme was such a, just a strong presence in my life. So, she always said before a test to have a piece of chocolate. I don't know why. I don't know
Okay.
what the rationale is behind that. So anytime I did a standardized test, whether it was like my LSATs or my SATs or an AP test, like anytime, and I've continued to do this in my adult life, like I would just have a piece of chocolate. And she would always send them to us, me and my cousins when we were in college, like Hershey Kisses or just any kind of small piece of chocolate. For her, it was just, she always said it was like a good luck thing. And so before the SAT, I do the same thing. I give my students before their SAT or their AP test a little piece of chocolate. Again, I don't know where she got that from, but it always makes me think of my meme. And who doesn't love a piece of chocolate, right?
Absolutely. I think I need to start doing that.
Yeah,
I should give it a try. I do
yeah,
love
I
chocolate, so it
recommend.
works in my favor.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
I
interesting.
recommend that. Definitely try it.
So that's the unconventional tip. Just have chocolate and you're just
Yep.
going to be fine, I guess.
Yeah, and it's gonna be okay.
Well, thank you so much, Alison, for taking the
Thank-
time.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so like this was so great. Thank you.
It was an insightful conversation. And I think right now I feel even more educated about the SAT test prep. So thank you. And I hope maybe sometime in the future we can get on another podcast.
Yeah, anytime. I would love to. Yeah, and I think you all again, I've really enjoyed using the Vibrant Publishing materials as well. Especially, students do learn better paper and pencil. So having those print materials too is really invaluable. And so I utilize those a lot as well. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. That's good to hear. Since we're moving into a digital world, that paper and pen is still valued as much as it is.
Yes, yes, still valued for sure, especially amongst myself and my English department colleagues.
Perfect. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.